The morning sun crawled over the edge of the high desert like a living flame, gilding the world in soft gold. The wind carried the scent of dry sage and distant rain, brushing across the vast emptiness of the New Mexico frontier. A single rider moved through the shimmering haze, Elias Kane, a quiet rancher whose life had been reduced to dust, silence and the rhythm of hooves against hard earth. Elias wasn't a man of words. Years of ranch work had turned him into something carved from stone, steady, patient, and alone. Since the war had taken his brother and the fever had taken his wife, he had lived only for the land and the animals under his care. He'd learned to be content with solitude until that morning when he saw her. She appeared first as a shimmer in the heat, then as a figure stumbling along the empty trail, barefoot, dress torn, hair matted with dust. Elias slowed his horse and squinted against the sun. She looked like a ghost blown out of a dream, frail and frightened, but her eyes held something fierce beneath the exhaustion. "Ma'am?" His voice was low, careful, as if sound alone might break her. She swayed and tried to answer, but no words came. Elias dismounted, offering his canteen. "You lost?" Her hands trembled as she drank. "I ran," she whispered. "From them." That was all she said, but it was enough. Elias knew what she meant. The territory was full of ranch barons and outlaws who treated laborers like property, chaining them to debts they could never repay. "Name's Elias," he said. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you while I'm here. You can ride with me till you find your feet." She hesitated, then nodded. "Clara," she said softly. They rode together in silence, the desert stretching wide around them. Elias didn't ask questions. He'd learned that sometimes silence was the gentlest kind of kindness. By evening, they reached his ranch, a humble spread tucked between red mesas and open sky. He offered her food, water, and a spare room once meant for guests. That night, Clara sat by the window watching the stars bloom above the plains. The world felt too large, too free after months in captivity. She'd been taken in by a traveling crew that promised work and paid with chains. Her hands still bore faint rope burns, reminders that freedom always came at a cost. Downstairs, Elias sat by the dying fire, wondering what kind of life she'd left behind. He told himself it wasn't his concern, but he couldn't forget the way she'd looked at the sky, as if seeing it for the first time. Days turned into weeks. Clara helped around the ranch, feeding the horses, mending tack, and finding comfort in the steady rhythm of honest work. Slowly, laughter returned to the walls that had long known only silence. Elias noticed the way she hummed to the animals, the way sunlight caught in her hair. It stirred something he thought long buried, a quiet warmth that scared him more than any gunfight ever had. One afternoon, while leading a skittish colt to water, Clara slipped. The animal reared, startled. But Elias was there in a heartbeat, steadying the reins. For a moment, their hands met, rough, calloused, and trembling with the same unspoken truth. "You okay?" he murmured. She nodded, eyes shining. "I'm learning," she said. "Freedom still feels strange." Elias wanted to tell her that freedom wasn't strange at all, that she belonged under this wide sky, but the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her heart beating fast in the quiet. That evening, a storm rolled in from the west, turning the horizon black with thunder. When the first lightning split the sky, Clara froze, memories clawing at her chest. She remembered the shouts, the ropes, the night she escaped. Elias found her trembling near the barn. "Hey," he said softly, taking her hands. "You're safe now. Nobody's coming for you." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You don't know that." "I know courage when I see it," he replied. "And I reckon you've got more of it than most men I ever met." In that storm-lit moment, the walls around her heart finally broke. She leaned into him, seeking shelter not from the rain but from the memories. He held her without speaking, feeling her heartbeat steady against his chest. Outside, thunder faded to a whisper, and dawn came gentle and pink across the hills. The world was new again. Clara stood on the porch, watching, sunlight spill over the land that no longer frightened her. Elias joined her, his coffee steaming in the morning chill. "Think you'll stay a while?" he asked quietly. She smiled, eyes bright with something fierce and free. "I think I already have." As the day rose over the desert, the ranch came alive. The horse whinnied. Wind rustled through the grass, and two souls once broken by loss began to rebuild. It wasn't a story of rescue, but of finding peace where there'd been none, love where there'd only been pain. The summer wind came down from the mesas, dry and restless. It carried the smell of dust, juniper, and rain that never quite arrived. On mornings like this, the land looked endless, and so did the work. Elias and Clara rode the fence line together, their shadows long against the sage. The silence between them was easy now, the kind that feels like belonging. Weeks had turned into months since she arrived. The bruises on her wrists had faded, but the ones inside her still ached when she remembered too much. Yet every sunrise over Kane Ranch pulled her, farther from the girl who had run, for her life and closer to the woman, learning what freedom meant. Elias kept his distance in words, but not in care. He fixed her saddle before dawn, left coffee waiting on the porch, and taught her the slow patience of horses. She, in turn, mended his torn shirts, laughed at his stubborn mule, and filled the house with the faint sound of humming. The place that once echoed with loss had begun to breathe again. One afternoon they rode to town for supplies. The settlement of Dry Creek lay along a narrow riverbed, its few streets lined with weather-worn buildings. Clara walked beside Elias through the general store, the air heavy with dust and talk. A few men turned to stare, some out of curiosity, others with the cruel glint of gossip. "That her, Kane?" one whispered. "The runaway girl?" Elias heard but didn't answer. His jaw tightened, and he shifted slightly so Clara could stand behind his shoulder. She felt the weight of old fear stir in her chest. But Elias's calm presence anchored her. When they left the store, he said quietly, "You don't owe explanations to anyone. Folks talk because they can't do better." Her smile was small but sure. "I'm learning that too." That night, back at the ranch, lightning flickered far off in the hills. Clara sat by the corral, watching the horses pace before the storm. Elias joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. They sat in silence until she said, "When I ran, I didn't think I'd live another day. I never thought I'd find a place like this." He looked at her then, really looked, the dust on her skin, the steadiness in her gaze. "Maybe you didn't just find it," he said. "Maybe you made it." The storm broke, wind whipping through the grass. They ran for the barn, laughing as rain poured in silver sheets. Inside, the world shrank to the sound of water on the roof and the warmth between them. For a moment they just stood there, breathless and soaked. "Elias," she said softly, "you gave me back my life." He shook his head. "No, you took it back yourself. I just happened to be around when you did." Her hand brushed his. The touch was simple, honest, and enough to speak what both had been afraid to say. In the dark hum of the rain, hearts that had once been strangers began to move together. Days later, trouble came in the form of 3 riders kicking up dust on the horizon. Elias saw them first from the porch. "Stay inside," he told Clara, but she shook her head and stood beside him. The men reined in their horses at the gate. Their leader, a broad man with a scar across his jaw, tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Heard you got yourself a runaway, Kane. She's company property." "We're taking her back." Clara's stomach knotted, but she didn't step back this time. Elias's voice was even. "Ain't no property here. The law's clear. Anyone forced into labor's free to walk away." The man spat. "Law don't mean much out here." Elias's hand drifted near his holster, calm but ready. The wind carried the smell of gun oil and rain. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. "You can tell your boss I'm not afraid anymore. And if he wants to try again, he'll have to come through both of us." Something in her eyes made the man hesitate. Maybe he saw what Elias already knew, that freedom once claimed can't be taken back. After a tense pause, the riders turned and vanished into the haze. When the dust settled, Clara let out a shaking breath. Elias smiled faintly. "You handled that better than I could have." "I just remembered what you said," she replied. "Courage doesn't come from guns. It comes from staying put." He nodded. "You learn fast." Autumn came early that year. The cottonwoods by the creek turned gold and the nights grew sharp. Clara harvested the last of the garden, humming under her breath. Elias watched her from the porch, thinking how strange it was that the quiet he once loved now felt empty whenever she wasn't near. That evening, he built a fire and found her sitting with a book he didn't know she owned. "You read?" he asked. "Learnin'," she said. "You teach me horses. I'll teach myself words." He smiled. "Fair trade." As twilight deepened, she closed the book and looked at him. "Elias, what happens now?" He hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do I keep staying here because I'm safe, or because I want to?" He met her gaze, steady and warm. "That's for you to decide. But if you ask me, I'd be mighty grateful if you wanted to." For a heartbeat, she said nothing, then reached across the small space between them. Her fingers found his, and in that simple act, the question was answered. Winter rolled in on quiet hooves. Snow dusted the mesas. The air turned clear and sharp, and the ranch felt like a world apart. On Christmas morning, Elias found Clara in the barn wrapping a blanket around a newborn foal. She looked up, cheeks pink from cold. "He came early," she said. "Guess he was ready for a new start," Elias replied. They laughed, and the sound filled the barn with warmth. He reached into his coat and handed her a small wooden charm shaped like a star. "Made it from the old fence post," he said. "Figured it was time we stopped mending the past and started building the future." Clara took it gently, tears bright in her eyes. "Then let's start with this place," she whispered. "And maybe with us." Elias nodded. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, blanketing the land in silver. He drew her close, not as a rescuer or protector, but as a man who had finally found someone who understood the quiet language of endurance. The world beyond the ranch still held its dangers, but for the first time, neither of them felt alone. Under that wide, wild sky, the cowboy and the girl who found freedom built something stronger than walls or fences, a home. If this tale touched your heart, ride with us again. Hit subscribe for more stories of love, courage, and second chances beneath the western sun. Every click keeps these campfire stories alive.